Fantastic. Well, welcome to the next episode of the Disruption Lab. We are doing interviews and conversations with those people who are, disrupting industries, changing, fields, and really trying to make radical changes in, some of the work that they're doing. And I'm honored to have our next guest here tonight, Chris Jones, founder and CEO of MatchRight Care. Chris, how you doing, man?
Good, man. If I can suppress this cough, we'll be good, man.
We'll get through it.
We'll get through it, man. We'll get through it. But yeah,
No,
glad to be here, man. It's anytime I get the opportunity to tell the story and connect with people, I'm always there.
Fantastic.
Cough and all.
Yeah, no, fantastic. We'll get through it. We can edit out the cough.
Yeah,
Don't worry about
Let's
that.
get that.
Don't worry about that. We can make that work. Make the magic work. So. Let's start a little bit. I want to, before we jump into MatchRight, I want to start a little bit with your background and maybe set it up that way. So you're not originally a Kansas Citian, right? You're not originally from Kansas City?
I'm a Southern guy. I'm from Mississippi.
Okay.
I grew up and graduated high school in Mississippi, but I am adopted Kansas Citian. I got here right after high school, probably a year or two after I graduated high school. I moved up here and been up here ever since.
So you've been here for a while?
Yeah, it's a second home. I consider this home too.
Yeah, no. And I know there's other reasons that you are married to Kansas City, and we'll talk about those things here in a minute. Yeah. So when you got here, all right, so that was after high school. What was your first job, like out of college? Like when you started working, because I know you were in the field you're in a little bit. You were doing work in this field first. So where were you at?
So when I first started coming out, through college, I was at Sprint for a while.
Okay.
I did some stuff at Sprint. Went on to do some stuff at Hallmark. I've been going back and forth, different places like that. But out of my first real job, I consider like real job was probably the Sprint. Right, Sprint.
Okay.
That was the first one. And it was sales. It wasn't even technology. It was just in sales.
I didn't even realize that. I'm a former Sprint executive.
Were you? Yeah,
24 years, man.
It was sales. It was sales.
Okay.
Sales.
All right. When did you get into the technology side?
I kind of stumbled into it. I think I did some work at ADT, right? Did some support at ADT. As soon as I got back from Sprint, I did some work there. And that's when I kind of dabbled in the technology side. It was one of those things to where, like, you've always had the knack for technology, but corporately, as things change, I just kind of stumbled into that away from the sales side of things and just the business side of things. Technology just made the most sense to me. I could relate to it, you know what I mean?
Yep.
In that space. And you're not going to have all the answers, whatever, but you can figure it out. And that's what technology is about. It's not having all the answers. It's being able to navigate through things and figure out a solution.
Sure. Yeah. Problem solving using the technology. What was your first kind of, when you were dabbling in technology, when you were first starting in technology, what were you kind of interested in, or what were you doing?
I'll say this. So more so for me, it was in music. I'm a music guy. I played for churches. I grew up playing music. So, it's always sound and all that stuff.
Okay.
So I still do that today. So in my office, I still have like a mixing board and all that stuff. Don't do anything with it, but it's still in my room. But that's where technology started for me. Right? I tried to get into the film side of stuff too, because it's all artistic, but I wasn't really that good in that. But music has always been, that may be my introduction to technology through music. Fruity Loops, all you guys that do design in studio, I started way back then, unless you know my age, but I always was trying to make beats and stuff like that. So that is technology now. More so now it's adopted, more so now it's technology than it was back then. But I think that was my first bite of technology.
Okay, all right. And so did you at any point as a youth or as you were starting to get into technology fields, were entrepreneurship a thing that was on your radar screen?
So entrepreneurship for me always exists. I think it's in everybody. So I was an entrepreneur back in 5th grade when I was selling now later to my classmates, right? It's all that adaptation to where you have a product that you want to sell and you have to convince somebody to sell it, buy in for that. I think that's always there. When it comes to corporately in the corporate world and just in business world as I got older, those same skills apply, right? It don't really change, right? You tap back into what you've done when you're younger. It's just different people and different audiences. So I always say that anybody ever sold anything or aspired to sell anything, younger or older, whatever, if you sell lemonade on a lemonade stand, you have to convince somebody to buy that, right? It's a product. So I think it's always been in me, but just adapting to the world around me. What's around me? What can I make better? What can I make change? What can I change to make better? That's where I think innovation comes in at. When you tap into the real parts of technology, it's when technology started changing the way people live and the way people operate.
Did you think you were going to be an entrepreneur though? Like was this one of those things where someday I'm gonna have my own company? Or was it more, kind of the why of MatchRight Care that really was your driver to have your own business?
See, I've always done entrepreneur. From Tupperware, I try to do government grant stuff. And from 19, I've always been in this space to the point to where I used to tell my dad all the time is that school is school, college is college, but it's not where I wanted to go with it. I eventually did it because of my dad, but I never saw that as my path. I always was a little different in that space. I felt like anything that you learn in books, not demonizing any college or anything like that, but for me, even in school, when I was going to school, I felt like this was not going to be my answer. It's a means to what I want to do. But I figured anything that I was going to be successful at in life long term would have to be something that I did, I built.
Yeah.
So it's always been in me.
Yeah, no, I get that wholeheartedly, and it's one of those things where you can learn through books, you can learn through school, but until you get out and start doing things, and until you get out and start in the real world, that's where the learning really starts.
Yeah, it's a balance, and I think it's more. Again, I think it's more adopted now than ever before because you see a lot of corporate going into the entrepreneur space. Because I think entrepreneur space even exists in the corporate world. Because if you're on a new project, you're working on a new product, whatever that is, you have to think entrepreneurially in that space anyway. It just gets adapted down there because you stepped out on your own, you do it for yourself. There's not resources that you can tap into. You got to create those own resources. Right. That's the biggest thing about being an entrepreneur than being in the corporate world. I think the thought process has to be the same in most cases, but you have to get your own resources when you're on your own, whether it's finances, whether it's support, partnerships, all of that is not given to you. You got to go find it. And those are where you see the most successful entrepreneurs are not the one that think entrepreneurially, because I think there's a lot of people do that, is the ones that can find the resources to support that.
That's interesting. So, that's interesting. It's less maybe about the mindset, the grit, some of those things, and your ability to navigate the next step and the next milestone and find the things you need to do to get there.
Yeah, I think it is, because I don't, anybody at this, I think, again, tides are changing. Everybody's kind of getting into entrepreneur space. I think it's always been in people, right? I think it's always been in some people, the fear of doing it or whatever it is, a lack of think they don't have the knowledge to do it, and then a lack of adoption of the entrepreneur space. Because if you said you want to do something on your own, people kind of frown on it. Parents would be like, hey,
sure, I
put you to school, you go to school, whatever. But I think the world is really adopting more. I think the big framework of business is kind of breaking down now. They're even tapping into, entrepreneurs now to help grow big business. Big business tapping to entrepreneurs. And I think the world is going to change even more so now. I got kids. I got a daughter that just graduated from law school. And her whole thing now is like, what can I do more? Law is there. She has a degree, but
sure,
what else can she do outside of that?
That's like her foundation.
It's a foundation. I think that's how you see it. And I think I'm older now, but how do I be that example to my kids and everybody else coming up and say, what, if I did at my age or whatever, what if you start a little earlier, right? Give them that advantage. I think that's our job, is to pass it on.
So let's talk about MatchRight. So what was the catalyst for you to decide to start your own company?
MatchRight was not intended to be a company. I never intended to be that at all. I think just a background on that is I had a son. The reason why I'm adapted to Kansas City is my 5-year-old son was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And when he got diagnosed, right at diagnosis, they said he's going to die within a year. I watched him go through his whole 11 months and he passed. But in that time frame, trying to get him the help he needed and get them support he needed, that we missed a clinical trial because we didn't get his medical records in time. When we missed those medical records, didn't get those medical records in time, it was frustrating for me because looking back on it, it wouldn't have helped him, but the idea that I couldn't get him to where he needed to go, and to him, it was just a vacation. We said, we're going to take you on this vacation, but we knew it was treatment. But at a 5-year-old, we had to relate to him. So even going back and telling him, the hardest part of that was not missing the trial as much, but to tell him like, hey, we're not going on that vacation now, because we couldn't just take him anywhere. He had to go where there's a facility to help him. And that was the toughest part for me to adapt to. More than missing that clinical trial was going back to my son and say, what, we were getting hyped about this vacation that you can't go on now. That was the toughest part for us.
I have 3 daughters, and I just can't imagine, that feeling of helplessness that you probably were going through, of like what's out of your control. We always talk about like focus on what you control.
Yeah. So, what, I'm gonna say something. I never really said this before. So, we always talk about what started MatchRight because he missed a clinical trial. It's one part, but for 11 months, I watched him slowly lose his life. Right. So those stories exist beyond that. Even though that story is big, that we missed a clinical trial, the biggest thing that probably drive me through the journey of MatchRight is from his diagnosis, he said he would lose his ability to walk, his ability to talk, his ability to breathe, and it all happened in 11 months. But one of the most powerful things in that journey beyond missing that clinical trial is I watched my 5-year-old go from walking and skateboarding to crawling. And as a dad, that's hard because when you're teaching your son to walk, you're telling him to stand up, if sit, get down, get back up and keep going, right? And I was really hard. I was a tough dad, in that way. Even as potty training and all that stuff, growing up, even at 5, I was a very tough dad. But the hardest part of the journey was watching him go from walking to crawling. I watched him crawl from one end to the room, to the kitchen, and back and forth. And watching him crawl as a dad, I'm like, son, you got to get up. I want to help you. So I wanted to help him. I'm trying to grab him. I'm like, don't crawl. You need to walk, and I'll help you walk. Just ask me. I'll come get you. But he didn't want me to do it at 5. He won't let me help him. He would crawl back and forth. He would crawl just like a baby, turn around and sit up and watch TV and crawl again. And for Dad, that was hard. Because when I watched him do that, I didn't want to see my son crawl at all. But what I instilled in him was like, you get back up. If you got to crawl, you get to point A to point B. So even though I had changed, right? In my mind, like, I gotta be more caring to him and supportive of him in ways and help him even more. And his mind was like, no, Daddy, you taught me to be tough. Yeah. And those are the things that really drive me, right? The things that even in business, anything else, when you instill those things in, it's times that you don't realize that you need to kick in on those things that you learned earlier, right? He did, and I had lost track because I was gone. As a pops, watching my son crawl, no, we're not doing. I'm gonna carry you if I got to, right? I put wheels on this chair like this. I had wheels on. I'll push him around. But when it got to getting to point A to point B, I could do it myself, right? He was 60 pounds overweight. His left leg was turning right. He could barely see straight. But when he wanted to get to point A to point B, he made sure he got there if he had to crawl. And I got to the point he wasn't able to do that. But those are the things that drive me, even beyond the story of not getting his medical records and all that stuff. That's tough. That drove MatchRight. But what sustains MatchRight is that story right there.
Yeah, it's we always talk about how resilient kids are and how as parents we're less resilient. They can do that. They can go to point A to point B and they know that's the mission. But for us, we feel like
we're weak. We're all right because it's the innocence of it too. Like it took me 2 years to get to the point to realize what I went through with him, right? CJ's gone, but that journey still lives on for me. It's moments like that drives me and get me through the toughest time. It's always easy to make a decision to do something. It's not easy, but it's easier to make a decision to do something. It's even harder to sustain it, right? So of course, missing those records just pissed me off enough to say, I'm gonna do something, whatever.
Yep.
When everything went to left and everything's going wrong, whatever, you gotta have that power to sustain it. But it's memories like him crawling back and forth. Those are the things that drive me. Those are memories of him and that journey that really drives me in MatchRight.
So I saw something recently, and you and I had a conversation about this, and I think before we get more into MatchRight, I do want to talk about this. You stopped focusing on this story as part of the MatchRight story for a period of time. And you recently, when we talked, you told me, I got to get back to that core why and that, why I'm doing this. What was the catalyst to I don't want to say let go of it. I'm just going to characterize it that way. What was the catalyst for you to stop that focus? And what has moved you back to that's got to be where you're at?
Yeah, so anytime you do something new, you don't know everything, right? So my thought process with MatchRight is I wanted to make sure the patients have it. I want to sustain that. But when you go into for the first 3 years, our focus was really getting MatchRight built and get it built out. And over the last 18 months, our goal was let's see if we can get it in the market. So getting into markets is different because it's not just you building behind the scenes, building your technology behind the scenes. It's people judge you on that technology, what it needs to do, what it needs to look like. How would we use it? Could you do this and change it this way? And in that way, it would shift your mind. It would change. You want to adapt to what everybody else says it should be, right? And it takes you away from your why. You hear that Simon says why, but it takes you away from your why. And because you want to appease everything that you're hearing. You spent 3 years building this software, being integrated all over the United States and getting connected. And then everybody you're trying to sell it to is saying, well, I love it, but it should do this. And everybody has something different. So that's what drew me away from it. Just recently for me, I had an internal team. I got rid of my whole sales team. I had to get rid of it all by attrition, but there was a lot of things that was going on there. But it was the best thing I did because I always said that I never really liked the word sell. You have to have buy-in, right? Who's buying into it, right? You're not selling it to them, they have to buy into it. And I couldn't make people buy into it when I'm trying to sell it to facilities and get facilities connected. It was a patience is what we built it for. It was those stories that we connected, people like CJ, people that want to get connected and unify their records. That's what we built it for. And when I got to that mindset to where I was like, well, we need to move away from facilities and really focus on patients, and got rid of everything that was negative around me, and we just focused, the team got smaller, but it got so much more smarter.
Yeah.
And you realize when you got smaller, you said you had all the tools you needed all the time, right? And you realize that some of the things you were trying to appease people and get connected with certain people that you may not be beneficial to you, you realize that you wasted a lot of time and money connecting to the wrong things. And when you come back home to your why, when everything gets screwed up and messed up, you got to go to the thing that drives you. And I had to think about my son crawling. I said, that's what I'm doing it for. There's another kid around. There's a mother that's taking care of their daughters, a father that's taking care of their kids. And there's a parent, that's being taken care of by their kids too. So you want to be able to support that. And we have to get back to that.
Yeah.
I could tell that story, right? You sit in a room, in a boardroom, and you walk in the room, and we're talking about what facility needs to, how do you change your raise your sales, how you get more patients in beds and all that stuff, which is great. MatchRight can help with all that too. But walking in a room is not a comfortability to talk that direction to it. But you bring me in and talk about the patients that you're seeing that adapt it, relate to that, it federates back into those other conversations. But you got to start where you're comfortable at and where your why is, and everything else will fall into place.
Yeah, it's so powerful, even in that situation when you're talking to a room full of people or whatever, and you're trying to get that buy-in that you're talking about, to be able to tell that one story that moves people. People buy on emotion. People buy on, you can talk about the red flags and the forecasts and the things, but people buy on emotion, right? They got to understand that one thing, right?
Yeah. And I'll be the first one. I lost that for like 12 to 18 months. I lost that, right? And some of that is because I couldn't deal with my emotions, right? It was tough for me to talk about CJ and talk about the why. I felt like he was being postered as the technology, and the real CJ didn't exist anymore. He was going away. So as a dad, I was like, the only thing as parents, we have with our kids is protect them at all costs. When they're not here, I can't protect us physically, but I protect that memory of him too. And I felt like he was turned into a software, right? He was something that people saw as a technology. So if it didn't work, they're saying CJ didn't work, right? Or if they didn't like the product, want to change certain features, feature sets on it, they were saying that CJ needed to change. That's personally what I had to deal with, right? When your why is so strong, you're connected to it, it can be a barrier at times. But then you sit me in rooms and we talk about CJ, whatever, it can be a strength. I had to learn how to balance that too. So I had to get past that point to where CJ, yes, he is seen as a product, but it was my job as father to keep his memory alive, even in talking about the product. I had to learn that. And it's been tough. Just being around people that see me from the start to finish. I even reconnected to people that started with me, those people too. So it's been really over the last 3 or 4 months, it's been really enlightening, It's been people who have been around me that's close to me at the same time you thought was there, was really just watching behind the scenes too. So you got to be careful about your crowd that you have, the people you have around you. And then your gut is your gut, right? That inner voice, that inner feeling, that is real, right? Whatever higher power you believe in, that thing is real. And I guarantee you the most successful things I've had in business is following that gut. Even when my mind is telling me something different, that gut is real.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, we always talk about trust your gut, and that's a lot of entrepreneurship is, go with the feeling for sure. So let's go back to the MatchRight piece and specifically. So, CJ's story and the idea that you didn't have access to or you didn't have access to medical records to get into a clinical trial, and your feeling was, that is one of the things that maybe prevented CJ from being around and from you could have done more, right? And my understanding, Chris, is that you felt that helplessness of not having control of your own destiny and your own medical records, and so that's what you're trying to solve for. How are you how are you doing that? How's MatchRight tackling that?
Yeah, so the biggest thing I can tell you is that we want to stay outside the bureaucratic bull crap, right? 100%. And starting out, that gave us a lot of pushback, 100%, because what it looked like for us is that anything that existed already is what we should have been working in. So any healthcare information exchanges, Cerner is based out of here in Kansas City, all those things, you need to connect with them. They need to tell you how to do it, this, and that. And what I was thinking about, and when I was building, was like, how far can I get and build an independent record sharing platform without ever tapping into those pieces?
Sure.
The interesting about that, the only way it would work from my professional experience is that the patient would have to sit in the middle, right? And then from my personal experience, it was the same thing. Because that's the one person that connects to all these different entities in healthcare. So we sought out to solve that. And the way it's a lonely road, right? In that case, trying to get VCs to invest in you, facilities to see what you're doing. I would tell you so many times I walked in rooms and I walked out of rooms and everybody's like, okay, that's a good idea. Let's see if he pulls it off, right? But you have to know, and I'll get on that in a minute, but when you walk in those rooms, you have to know when you walk in those rooms, not what they're telling you, but you got to read what they're saying when you leave the room, right? You have to know that there's cues in all those conversations.
Yeah.
I recognize when I walk in some of those rooms, I already know that I'm not walking there at the front of the line. I know that. But I also understand in conversation that's being said that what are they saying when I leave the room? What cues were they giving me then? Because your time is precious, right? You have to value that time. So you don't see me in a lot of places, or I don't go out, I don't be around a lot of stuff because your time is so valuable, right? And who you connect with and who you utilize it's important. So get back to the point of walking this room, getting connected, and where we're working on focus on the patients first. Is that what I learned is that a lot of times when you're trying to connect to things that you believe in, that you're connected with, and that stuff, you always get drifted away because sometimes people will tell you how they feel it should work and how things should work too. But you got to have so much belief in yourself to get through that. Because without belief in yourself and belief in where you want to take it, it's almost impossible to be successful.
The Peter Diamandis, who runs Singularity University and created the X Prize, he puts out a monthly newsletter. He's always putting out blog posts. And recently he did one where he talks about one of the greatest superpowers of an entrepreneur is that they're crazy.
Yeah.
And when he talks about it, it's not like, off the rails crazy, but it's you got to do things that people tell you can't be done, or that people tell you, your goal is to do things that are, everybody's going to tell you, don't do it. You can't do that.
I'm gonna jump on that really because I did a video. I was gonna put it on TikTok, but I'm gonna share here. So what you mean by it is crazy is that most time when everybody when things happen and they're like, and things happen and most people are kind of like stepping away or being very precautious, entrepreneurs double down. Like you're in debt, whatever, it's going, well, we got to dig in to get out of it, right? And it scares everybody else around it, but it scares them. I'm telling you, I recently did it. Like when everything was going left and I had everybody around me panicking, whatever, I said, nope, we're going down deep or whatever, because I need to get enough leverage to get out of it. And that's what entrepreneurs are a little different. And that's the good ones, right? And not saying I'm anything special at all, but the really good ones understand that. And not only do they double down, they can lead people to follow them in some crazy places, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is. That's what that's what the crazy is, right? It's not just doing it and going out there, but it's to have people to follow your crazy ass out of there, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's about, being that passionate about it. To where, I don't know where he's going, but this dude, I'm following him all the way through it, And some are gonna drop off. And then even as entrepreneurs, you have to be crazy enough to know that when people are falling off, you have to recognize you only need maybe 20 of them started out with you, but you have to recognize I have them too, or that one.
Yep.
I'm good. You know what I mean?
I got my ride or die.
I got my ride or die. That's all I need. Everything. I can walk through a lot of places. It's gonna be tough, but I know I can get through there.
Yeah, for sure.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that is.
That's crazy.
But you're right. That's what really drives the great ones is, embracing that crazy and understanding that I don't have to convince everybody.
Yeah.
I just have to convince enough people to do this with me and to get this done.
Yeah, you gotta lock in. And sometimes, the why helps. Like it really does. Mine is mine, right? CJ is mine, it's a strong why, but that why helps. But everybody has that. 90% of people have been through something traumatic, whatever. Tap into it, right? It's not like what drives you. I'll give you an example of my son. My son plays football, and I'm always on him like, man, what makes you mad? Like, I just need you to lock in whatever, what makes you mad? And he's like, Dad, nothing makes me mad. I don't want to act, I don't want to, show that side of me, whatever. And I told him, I said, you're going to have to tap into that sometimes, right? It's not that you have to dwell on it, but you need that spark, that fuel, whatever. Whatever you can find, tap into that, and it drives you. CJ drives mine. It's with me every day, all the time. It's certain things happen, I can still smell them at certain times, So it's a strong for me. And it's been almost 12 years, I still haven't got past it, whatever. But I use it for fuel. At one point, it was a handicap, but now it's a plus for me. You just have to know how to use it and cherish it.
So what was it like tackling? So, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you here at TDL was the idea that when we think about disruption, where are those areas where disruption is most needed? And I mean, healthcare, we all, I think, agree that something's got to change, right? So what was it like for someone who, you know, wasn't in that industry, wasn't in that, you know, didn't have the background on how all that stuff worked to say, I'm going to change this? Like, where did you start? Like, what, you know, what?
Yeah, that's the best place to be, right? So, like anybody that comes from those industries, whatever, they're already baked in. Their thought process is baked in. I'll tell you, when I started, getting back to the original question, I'm following you now. So, I'll tell you, when I started, I didn't seek out anybody that was in those healthcare spaces. Just enough to know. I had some doctors behind me, investor doctors behind me, but I really didn't seek out, you know, the clinical bureaucratic process of it. I tried to stay out of it as much as possible. My goal was to see how far I can get independently. I knew I would have to interchange in the corporate side, but how long can I stay out this bureaucratic stuff? So I just kept building and learning. And that's the good part about it, because most of my career and every job that I have, I've been on technology, more on projects to innovate and change things, right? And what I used to tell people, most of my jobs that I had or projects that I was on, what innovation does two things. It kind of saves the budget, but it reduces support of people that need to have it. That's just the way it works. And a lot of times when you're doing that, you want to stay away from a legacy mindset, right? It's a real deal, right? People that's been in one place 20, 30 years, whatever, those are not the ones you want to lead innovation at all.
Right.
You need their input to understand how the legacy works now, so you can go disrupt it. It's ethical hacking.
Yeah.
And that's what you need. In order, you want to ethical hack something, you have to see it outside of where everybody else sees it. You want to know what it does, but you want to see how to penetrate that in your own way. And that's what we did in MatchRight. We kind of went along, and when I thought I would have to integrate a couple years ago, I realized that, okay, I can keep building until we got to where we are today. Our goal is to be a universal patient record, right, across all domains of healthcare. That's where we're driving towards. That's what we want to be. And who would have known 2 or 3 years ago we'd be where we are now? And we're kind of quiet about it. You know, we're just kind of hammering nails. But we realized kind of, you know, what our purpose is. And the only way that happened is we stayed outside the bureaucratic mindset, the legacy mindset, the bureaucratic processes. We didn't connect to third-party apps. We tried to stay away from all that. We went directly to the source, directly to the patient. We took out the middleman. And the way I would explain that in technology to be successful, I would say YouTube, Facebook, and those things. And the way I kind of explain that is that if you think about streaming channels now, you know, before it used to be for a football Sunday, back in the day, if you had a Super Bowl commercial, it would cost you a lot of money to have that ads now. The most successful Super Bowl commercial halftime show started, it started with, I don't know if anybody watched Living Color, right? They were one of the first ones to do a Super Bowl commercial at the end. They just streamed it on their own. It was the most successful halftime show, the first successful halftime show. And now they have halftime shows after that, whatever. But they went against the mold. They weren't paying millions and millions of dollars for the ad. But that's just how I see just technology. You have to see outside the box, because everything's meant to be disrupted. It's meant to be.
Yeah, you built to the vision you thought it should be without any regard for how it works, right?
You got to be crazy to do it. We're going to use it with crazy.
Yeah.
You have to be a little out of whack, say, I'm going up against it. It's not even going up against the industry or the standards, whatever. It's really just building your own.
So if you put the patient in control of their record, right? Like, at what point did you have to, you know, reconcile, it's got to go here and this is legacy, or it's got to come from here and it's legacy? And like, because I remember talking to you when you were in Pipeline, and you were talking about how you were building the platform forever before you were even going to start doing those. Like you were building all those integrations, you were building all these things before.
That's good. And this would be good. So you too, right? So I just came up with this. So everybody's like, well, Chris, when are you going to roll it out? What are you doing? What's the revenue model and all this stuff? So I equate what we're building is to pharmacy, right? Pharma drugs, right? Usually when they treat a drug, it takes 5 or 6 years to get FDA approval and get tested. But once they're out, they're profitable because everybody's using it, right? So the R&D research was important for us because we think of it the same way. We were looking at a record that has to connect from, I don't care if it's a research facility, needs to connect to a hospital, physical therapist, whatever. It should look the same for the patient. So in order to happen, we have to travel those roads. And some of the technology wasn't even up to the standards that we need to be. So over time, we built that R&D because our goal was that when we roll it out is that it can touch anybody. It can be you taking care of your mom or me taking care of my son, you know, our college student in college. It should all look the same to that patient. So we looked at it almost like a pharma drug. So when it rolled out, that pill, it doesn't matter. When a pharmacy drug rolls out, it doesn't matter if you're black, white, small, short, tall, none of that matters. That same pill is for the same person. That's how we looked at how I always looked at MatchRight. So when you download the app, it shouldn't matter where you're trying to go. It should always look the same to that patient.
I'm having a moment. I lost my mom years ago. She went through about 5 years of
sorry to hear that.
Of treatment and trying to figure out what was wrong. And in hindsight, it was so long ago, I never had put together the dots of if she maybe had control of getting stuff from doctor to doctor, would that have changed the opportunity? I've never even thought about it that way until this moment.
And so getting into the medical field too is one thing I learned when CJ was going through it. I would always say this: it's called a practice for a reason. It's a practice. Think about it. You're in medical field. Your life is dependent on it. Say this is a practice. Because they don't know. It's not the answers, right? They're the best ones to find it, but they're also looking through their book. But things happen and change. I'll give you a really, really, really good example. So when CJ was diagnosed, they put him on steroids, dexamethasone, and he was going. His brain, the tumor was swelling so bad to where they put him on the amount for a 220-pound man, and they was like, "This amounts to stop the swelling on his tumor." And I'm like, "But he's not 220. It doesn't make sense." But for them out of practice, that's how you treat a tumor that size, regardless of what the body is. The tumor was doing this, right? But the body wasn't adjusting. So at one point, it stressed me out so bad, I took him off of Dex. I tried to take him off. I'm like, I'm not doing this no more. He's swelling. I never told the story. But he was swelling so bad, and said, we was like, we're going to take him off of it. It's just too much. But us not knowing that you can't just take him off steroid, you have to wean him. We took him off when he went down, he crashed. We had to rush him to the hospital. We didn't know what was going on because we took him off those steroids, whatever. Because it was so strong, and they said, you have to wean him off of this. And I realized, I was like, and then that's when I asked him, I said, well, how much are you giving him? He said, to treat this tumor, this is what we have to do to treat that tumor. I said, but that's a lot. He's still a little, he's 5.
Yeah.
But to them, the body didn't necessarily matter as much as the tumor did, right? Because it's a practice on that tumor. It's a practice. It's your job to take care of yourself and be able to push back on it. So you know what? When I talked to him again, they didn't give him that much again. And they've adjusted maybe 30, 40% of what they were giving. And he was okay.
Yeah.
But the practice said this is what they give him.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's powerful. What was, as you were going through this journey, Chris, I want to shift to entrepreneurship again, talk about the building of a company, the building of a product, the getting it out into market. What was the hardest part about that? When you look back on kind of, and I know there's been, different trials and tribulations as you've gone through this journey. But what was the thing that you felt was the hardest part of all of that?
Honestly, dealing with people, right? And that's a hard thing to say, but it's the truth. Because when you're building things on your own, your mind is where it's at. But when you have to kind of deal with people that don't necessarily see it your way, that want to drive a different direction, and you have to protect yourself against people sometimes, right? And just groups. Just recently, there's a lot of stuff that's happened, but everything I contribute to, every headache that I had or any major, has been tied to maybe making the wrong decision around who I had around people, right? Sad, but it's the truth, right? And I would say, as bad as it been, and I don't say a decision I just picked the wrong people, I honestly didn't pull in the right people that was always there either. They go both ways, right? Sure. So the hardest part is decisions on people around you, because you cannot do anything yourself. Good. You can't do it, right? You need that support. And there's 2 ways it can go: get the people that can help you, and then get people that can't, right? That there's a lot of people that has these shiny objects and has this background and careers and all the stuff they've done. Those are not the people you need most of the time. What you need is somebody that's going to get in there and learn it with you, right? You're disrupting. Who's going to help you disrupt and support that when it get chaotic? And those are the people you have to, attribute your success to at times when you're successful. And then at the same time, some things that doesn't go right, you have to look back and say, did I have the right person at that time? And then on people too is important, not just having the right or wrong people. There's sections in that journey, right? If you're traveling down the road, there's stop signs, there's a yield sign, there's all these signs you go through, and there's signs there that the person you have that started the journey with you, when you get that yield sign, might not know what that yield sign is, and you need to replace them. The journey you can't carry the same person throughout the whole journey. There's people that can help you climb the mountain, and there's people that help you stay there, right? So you climb the mountain, you got to put a peg in there. There's some people that are not good climbers, but once you get to the mountainside and you get on a ledge, There's other people those people are probably good at clearing out the road, building the house, and building, stabilizing. And you got to realize who's helping you climb and who's helping you stay. And you climb so often, like even when you get to a stabilization place, you're building. Once you get it level, you got to climb again. Those person that got you there may not be able to take you to the next stop. And that's one of the things that you have to have discernment about,
How have you, as you've gone through that experience and as you've encountered those situations, are there things that you do to like reassess those people and those individuals now? Are there like tips and tricks or things that you think about of, do I have the right team? Do you reassess on a regular basis now? Like, how do you handle that?
Absolutely. I think even like I'm bad. I'm bad, right? I'm loving everybody. Like I'm like bring everybody else in. That's not the right way to be. I'm like, we're gonna build this and grow together. What I've learned is to be more callous, right? And that's what good business be. That's one thing that I never had. And people that know me. My daddy is one of them, like, Chris, you're one of the nicest people. You got to get that out of you, right?
I feel that.
It's one of the things, but you have to be more callous when things are wrong. You got to be fire fast, right? Cut the BS out fast, right? Don't try to help everybody. You got to help yourself first. And that's one of the things that I've learned just recently is that you have to be callous in the sense when things are going wrong, identify it and get it out, right? And don't just get that out, get everything around it out, Because at the same time, when you have those one or two people, that's enough, right? That's enough to be successful. And we make the mistake sometimes thinking that you need all these expertise, all these people around you, and this is going to make us be successful. And most of the time, it slows you down, right? You got to answer the people that don't care perhaps cents about where does business go, what you do with it. They're just sitting there for an opportunity, right? They're holding on to your coattails. So you got to recognize who's holding on to your coattail or who's spanning the cape, to help you fly. So people is people.
Yeah, no, I always say the hardest thing about business is people.
It's people.
Yeah, I get criticized for saying that sometimes, but
it's the truth, man. Yeah. I'll shout it to the rooftop, Yeah.
So you said earlier when we were talking about, the difference between, entrepreneurs, good entrepreneurs, great entrepreneurs, one of those things is being able to find resources.
Yeah.
So what have you learned about that process? Where have you found resources? What have been the most valuable resources as an entrepreneur that you've been able to identify? And are some of those things common and more people need to know about them? Or are a lot of those things, you wouldn't know if that resource would work for someone else, but it just worked for you? You know what I'm asking? You know what I'm saying there?
Yeah, I get you. I think, this may come off wrong, you have to be less dependent and more inquisitive, right? Okay. Because sometimes you go in I've been through great accelerator. You mentioned Pipeline. I traveled through them all, and I got so many jewels out of that. But I'm not dependent on that, right? But I'm inquisitive on what they can provide for us. Like we're in Jumpstart now. Shout out to them. They're out of Nashville, and I'm always inquisitive on what they can provide for us, what resources I can tap in. Because if you're dependent on it, and somebody comes and say, hey, this is what works for me, right? You're like, all right, well, I need to use this resource. It's a toolbox, right? Everybody needs different tools for different things, but be inquisitive on how those tools work, not if it worked for somebody else. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. What have been the most, valuable resources or, have you had mentors that have meant more to you through the journey, those kind of things?
Yeah, I'm sitting here with one. You started
come on, man. Come on, man.
But I have been through, like, KC, I can't even shout at everybody, but Pipeline, Launch KC, I've been through it all, right? And there have been so many people to this point, the network, this is maybe the most important part about it, is your network is your most valuable tool to be able to tap in. And that network is your source of resources, right? Your tools that you tap into. As I went through each one of these, I can't say one individual was more valuable than the next because it's a journey.
Sure.
But what I've been able to do to build that network, even sitting here talking with you just over time, you know me, right? Like, it's not like we just talk whatever. I can see you 3 months on, we're still having the same conversation. Character matters, right? And that character that you have, when you portray that, and you attract those same resources, those same people into your network. So for me, I would say the most valuable thing is building a network that I've built of people that has the same character that can drive. That when everything went left, I can tap into those same network and be successful.
Yeah, nurture the network, man. You never know when you're going to need it, and you can't just let it lay dormant and then call on people and expect them to pick up the phone. Sometimes you gotta just reach out sometimes for no other reason, just to say, hey.
Yeah. I have one. I was in Accelerator. Shout out. Tom Douglas in Bentonville. So in Bentonville, I did an Accelerator, Fuel Accelerator last summer, and I haven't talked to him in a while, whatever, and everything was going amok. And I just happened to call him and talk to him. I told him what's happening. He's like, Chris, why didn't you reach out to me earlier? And he came all the way up here, to support it. But those are supports that you don't even know you have. If you don't ask, you never know, right? And then you have to look back, and when you're asking people to support you, you have to think about yourself. Have I portrayed the character that everybody knows that I'm coming to you is coming from an honest and decent space? And my dad would always say, Chris, have you done anything wrong? No. Then why aren't you asking, right? And those are, I love my dad. He's been like the biggest inspiration. He's the biggest critic of when I do things wrong. But he's been like on me. He knows me. Since I was a boy, I never really changed. As a man now, I have the same mentality. It just evolves because of people around me. But he would always say, it's like, Chris, you built a network and people trust you, like where you're around. And you got to tap into that. No matter what happens on the outside of it, whatever, that people that's in your network, they're going to trust you and they're going to go with you, And that's what I had to tap into, right? And I think just over time, and just I talk about people too, good and bad. And I feel like the worst part for me with dealing with people is not being peaking the wrong people, is being not using the right.
Yeah, you got a network for a reason, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's why you build them up. Oftentimes when we're looking at the ecosystem and we're talking about what do entrepreneurs need, what can we do to, help more startups get where they need to be and grow and hire and do the things that we want startups to do. One of the things we hear most often is, if we just have more money, like, fundraising,
Yeah.
we need more VCs, we need more funding, stuff like. Talk to me a little bit about your funding journey and some of the lessons you've learned about, asking for money or good money, bad money, some of those types of things.
So I've just started reaching out. I'm halfway decent at fundraising. I didn't really think about it before. So we bootstrapped to where we are now. We try to tap into the VCs as much as possible, but I have a group of doctors that started with me that I would always tap in with and get connected with. It's weird because when I went through our situation earlier this year, whatever, they were the main ones that had been with me for like 5 years, supported. But I would only tap into those guys when I needed support, whatever, And we try to get VC funding, and then fundraising is hard because you're giving away so much of your business or your control, So it's a balance, right? You don't want to just jump in with anybody, but you're going to need that capital to be able to be successful. And this may not be the right thing to say in a business side, but sometimes you got to have that faith and belief that you got to double down when it's not there. And I guarantee you, any startup or any founder story, there was a place to where they didn't have enough to get to the next.
Oh,
and
for
they
sure.
faked it to
and
make it.
if they tell you there wasn't,
they're lying to you, man. So don't let anybody think to you that they've always had the funding that they needed, whatever, or it was a cakewalk, or any of that stuff. But you got to have the faith. It's so important. The belief in what you're doing is so important. You got to be able to tap into that, right? Beyond the X's and O's, the dots and periods and all that stuff, the commas, you got to have the faith. It's the unknown part of that you tap into that will drive you. I really believe that. And that's what at the end of the day, the universe is so powerful, right? Where attention goes, the energy flows. That is so true, right? Yeah. There's never going to be a time where you're going to have it all right. There's always going to be a time where you feel like you don't have something going for you. You may feel like it's the end of the road. But I think you just got to have faith sometimes, right? It's a weird thing to say in business, whatever, but that's probably been the most successful thing to get me out of chaos. It's like, I don't care if it looks bad, the world is in it, it's storming outside, I'm going to get through this, whatever. And you drive everybody to believe that. That's like crazy and doubling down.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you talk about, needing to be more callous in business, and I think sometimes we try to separate, business and personal, or, home and work, and we try to compartmentalize all this stuff, and you don't realize that if people are the hardest part of business, I mean, that's a human skill. That's not a business skill. You know what I mean? Like you can't just leave those things aside. You have to embrace all of those tools you have at your disposal, and faith and the belief and the grit and your gut and those things. There's no book.
Raising kids, there's no book for it. There's no book for raising kids either. But raising kids teach you a lot of business. It'll teach you a lot, right? Because you got so many different personalities in that stuff too, And I think and I'm not attributing to employees as kids, but it's the same mentality. You have to relate to them, and be able to relate to them and see if as kids you can't get rid of, right? They're there, right? You got it. But your employees at the same time, if they're not a fit, they're not a fit, right? And you got to make that decision early. Learn from my mistake. Make that decision early. Because even if you don't, they'll sit in there and think they're a part of a lot of stuff that they're not, whatever. And then you realize that when it's time for you to move ahead and move away from them, you're like, God dang, this is I could have did this a long time. It was slowing me down. It was weights, you know.
Worse. Yeah.
It made it worse, and that's important. If I can help anybody save any headaches, even if you deal with partners, relationships, different agreements with other business or whatever. If that thing starts to weigh on you, and in your gut you feel like it's weighing on you, don't force that thing through. It's almost easier to chop it off and start again, right? And if you have I know there may be ties to it, in that matter, so you can't just cut it off super fast and completely, out the gate. But you have to wean it out too, right? Recognize it first. Like if you feel like it's weighing on you, recognize this weighing on you and start making adjustments to get that thing out, right? And that's how I always operated.
Yeah, that's great advice. I talk to too many people that hang on to those things too long. And sometimes I've been like, hey, sometimes you got to push through, but you got to know the difference between pushing through something and when you just don't have a good fit.
Yeah, you don't have yeah. Even with a good fit, when it's not there, you can't just chop it off either, right? You got to be really, just know it's there, right? And make those adjustments to make it happen. So when it's ready, you can, That's with anything, any business, any things that's going on that you're dealing with, is that sometimes you can't just jump out, right? Because there's too much connective tissue there where you got to slowly carve around it, whatever. And when it's time to chop it off and run. But it's your business, it's your idea, it's your drive, right? You're going to drive it. And I guarantee you, without any of that around you that you feel like swaying you down, once you get going, you run a lot faster with a less weight.
Yeah, no, for sure. Free your mind. The rest will follow,
Yeah.
What's next for MatchRight?
We're doing some great things. I'm really excited. We're doing some stuff with some X-ray stuff now. We're merging historical data with some X-ray data. We're working on some stuff for 3D imaging and stuff. So we got a lot. So we'll make an announcement of that pretty soon.
Okay.
We just did advancements with Ted Danson.
I saw that. Advancements? How was that?
It was cool, man. It was good. I'm really excited about the group we brought in. So we have a Cubisme group with Mora and Patients Rising we had there too. That's really helping us really cultivate this mission that we talk about before, is really making the patient the center. John Travis is from here, external exec, that's a part of that team, that we really came together to try to put this thing, put the patient first and really see this thing fully. My job is the technology side, really connect on the technology side, but having the other people around me, find the right partners again, I'm leading into that, right? So everything I'm saying is I wasn't there like 5 or 6 months ago, right? I'm getting there now, and that's where you find the right partners. So we're like, God dang, they've been around here the whole time.
Yeah.
This is what I needed, right? So I'm really excited about that. I got into my bag, right? I got my connections that I have. So I'm excited about where it's headed now. I'm in a comfortable space, right? It's uncomfortable, but I'm comfortable being uncomfortable now, right? And that's the space that I'm in now. I always wanted to build something to where I'm comfortable. Life is never comfortable. MatchRight's never going to be comfortable. It's not ever going to be in that space. You're going to always be uncomfortable, but at least know where I'm navigating through, right? So I'm comfortable where we are now with the unknowns, because I know I got the right team around me to help me navigate through it.
What's the saying? If you don't feel uncomfortable, you're not pushing hard enough,
right?
Especially if you're disrupting something.
You're disrupting. And in business, and it's crazy because some of us build business, we fight for comfort. When we feel like we're in comfort, we made it. But what business is not always trying to grow out, try to adjust and adapt? Even in a successful business, whatever, they're always looking for ways to adjust and grow. And so you got to get used to not being comfortable, whatever. You don't know what the sales, if you're selling down the seas, you don't know what the wind or rain is going to be. But you got to be comfortable that the ship that you built will get through it.
There are very few companies that I know of where I can honestly say there's almost the entire population is cheering for you.
Yeah.
But your business is one where I know every patient in the healthcare space is cheering for you, because we all know as patients we're up against a system that doesn't work for us.
Yep.
And so part of that is, how can I be in control of what I do? So we're all cheering for you, man.
I appreciate it. I'm cheering for them too, right? That's what we do it for, right? CJ ain't here, but there's a lot of other kids and family that's there. And those are my drives too. That's my drive too, is to make every patient be in control and then build on top of that. So I might be a bigger cheerleader for them than anybody is for me. And that's the honest God truth.
Sure, man. Well, Chris, I appreciate you spending some time with us, man. I appreciate you telling your story, and whatever we can do, whatever the community can do, whatever we can do to help you, we're here for it, because love the work you're doing.
Appreciate it. Same here, man.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Anytime, bro.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, it's time.